There was $750,000 my parents had put aside over the years, meant for a house, meant for putting his kids through university. Gone. Bet away, one hand at a time, by my father, at a blackjack table. My parents built a marketing company from nothing. Clients drove across town to work with them. And it all came apart. Not over years of bad luck, but over thousands of small choices he made, while telling himself the next hand would fix it. This isn't a story about a man who lost a bet. It's a story about a man who lost everything he built. There's one afternoon I keep coming back to. I was maybe 8 or 9. School let out, and instead of going home, I got dropped off at the office, the way I did most days back then. The place was never quiet. Phones ringing back to back. My dad moving room to room, shaking a hand here, cracking a joke there. My mom at her desk with 3 things open at once, never rattled. To a kid, it just looked like chaos. Good chaos. The kind that comes from a business actually working. My parents built that company from scratch, on loans and late nights, years of barely breaking even before it finally caught on. My dad ran client relations. He had that gift where a room got warmer when he walked in. My mom ran everything that made the place actually function. The accounts, the staff, the billing. It wasn't his business that she helped with. It was theirs. One client stood out from the rest, the kind you dream about. We signed him early on and grew his business right alongside ours for years. He was proof that what my parents had built actually worked. We weren't rich in the flashy sense, but we never worried about money. Vacations happened. Bills got paid without conversation. My parents seemed, from where I stood as a kid, like 2 people who had figured it out. Nobody tells you addiction doesn't wait for you to be vulnerable. It doesn't need you to be struggling first. It just needs an opening. And success, ironically, is one of the widest doors there is. It didn't start as a crisis. It started as a hobby. A weekend trip, just for fun. My dad liked blackjack and roulette specifically. It felt like strategy, something he could outthink and control. He wasn't a guy blowing money on a slot machine. He was a guy who was good at cards. Everyone believed that for a while. I think he believed it longest of all. I remember the first time it felt like something to celebrate instead of something to hide. He came home late one night, grinning, practically vibrating with it. He'd won $45,000 in a single night. Within days, there was a brand new computer on the desk in my room, a motorbike in the driveway, gold and diamonds for my mom that she wore like it was nothing unusual. Nobody in that house was thinking about where the money came from. A win doesn't just pay for itself. It pays for the silence around it too. What none of us knew yet was what happened the very next day. He went back, certain he could turn $45,000 into something bigger. By the end of that night, he'd lost $70,000, the win, and tens of thousands more besides. That was the pattern already forming underneath the celebration. For him, a win was never a finish line. It was just permission to keep going. Then the trips became more frequent. He'd come home later, quieter. Working late, he'd say. Or, I had a meeting. Always something plausible. I remember being maybe 10 years old, watching him lie to my mom's face without blinking, understanding, in the vague way kids do, that something in our house had changed. For a long time, the company's success covered for him. The better the business did, the easier it was to keep gambling, because there was always more where that came from. Or so he thought. He started dipping into the company's cash flow. Small amounts, then loans. Actual loans, from actual banks. The first one was $15,000, then another for $40,000. Then a third, larger than the first 2 combined, until the number had climbed past 6 figures without anyone outside my parents' bedroom ever knowing exactly how high. He told my mom every one of them was to pay suppliers, restock inventory, cover equipment costs. Ordinary reasons, things she had no reason to question. Looking back, I can trace roughly how it worked. It started with the company's own line of credit. When that filled up, he moved to business credit cards, paying the minimum instead of the balance. And because our household savings, that $750,000 meant for a house, for university, sat in an account he had just as much access to as my mom did, none of it was ever really protected from any of this. I think about that a lot now. How the lie wasn't just, I gambled some money. It was a whole architecture. Invoices, conversations, plausible explanations, built to make sure the person working just as hard as him never found out what he was doing to the thing they'd built together. I woke up one night to voices downstairs. My mom wasn't asking anymore. She was telling him. The losses weren't bad luck. They were a pattern, and he needed to take a real break. He said he would. He didn't. After that, dinner got quieter. My mom started double-checking the mail, the bank statements, the calendar. She already knew what she was looking for. She just didn't have the paperwork yet. Addiction has a math problem, and eventually, the math always wins. He wasn't betting to have fun anymore. He was betting to recover what he'd already lost, believing every time that the next hand was owed to him. It never was. The loans kept stacking, just to buy a few more weeks before anyone asked questions. Even that one client we'd built up for years became a casualty of it. We couldn't afford to keep doing his marketing because the debt had crept into our own suppliers. They stopped supplying us. Others would only take cash up front because our credit was gone. Then the bank started calling. My mom picked up one of those calls herself, a joint account, so there was no reason not to, and found out that way, secondhand. One of my dad's checks had bounced. Not for some small amount. Over $25,000. He told her the night before he was working late that he'd had a meeting. That was the meeting. When it was all finally added up, the loans, the credit lines, the cash advances none of us even knew existed, the debt came to more than $1 million. Not the $750,000 that had vanished from our savings. More than that, stacked on top of it. He hadn't just lost what we had. He'd borrowed his way past it, and then some. And through all of it, he kept showing up to the office every day, shaking hands, acting like the same man he'd always been, while the business he was standing in was quietly bleeding out underneath him. The staff started noticing before we did. Fewer hours. A hiring freeze nobody explained. People who'd worked there for a decade started quietly updating their resumes. Because you can feel a ship taking on water, even when nobody says the word sinking. I don't know the exact moment my mom found out how bad it really was. I wasn't in the room. But the house felt different overnight. The way a house feels after a death, except nobody had died. What I do know, because I saw it myself, my dad moved into the guest room that same week. They'd always driven to the office together, every morning. That week, they started leaving separately, like two people who happened to work at the same place, instead of two people who'd built it together. What I understand now is that this wasn't just my mom finding out her husband had a gambling problem. It was her finding out that half of what she'd built had been quietly bet away, loan by loan, without her ever being asked. She put it simply once, months later. Your father had an addiction he couldn't control. Not an excuse, not an accusation, just a fact, said flatly. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a story about one bad decision. It reached into her life and took things that were never his to risk in the first place. There's no dramatic single day a company like ours closes. It's slower and sadder than that. The client roster getting smaller. Staff let go a few at a time. And then a final week. Nobody ever calls the final week. I remember the actual last day though. My parents asked us to come in and help pack up. Not movers. Us. We boxed up files that used to matter so much, took photos down off the walls, and at some point, someone took the sign down from outside. It came down easier than I expected, like it weighed less than all those years should have made it weigh. Nobody made a speech. We just worked, quietly, until there was nothing left to pack. I remember the last few staff who stayed until the end, people who'd been at my parents' house for holidays, watching them pack up their own desks over choices they never made and never knew were being made, was its own quiet kind of grief. My mom lost her work, her routine, the identity she'd built over years of running that company. My dad lost the thing that had made him somebody in that town. Both of them lost the same thing, technically, but only one of them caused it. They got divorced not long after. It wasn't a screaming, dramatic ending. It was exhaustion. My mom has said, more than once, that she didn't leave the man she married. That man had disappeared years before the papers were signed. She just finally stopped waiting for him to come back. As a kid, I didn't have the language for any of it. I just knew my parents didn't live together anymore, and I knew it was because of him. Not because of anything abstract like growing apart. Because of choices. Specific, repeated, chosen choices. My mom didn't get a graceful landing. She got a blank page, at an age when most people are settling into what they've already built, not starting over from nothing. She took the skills she'd spent years running that company with and rebuilt somewhere else, for someone else, as an employee this time, not an owner. She never once made us feel like it was our fault, or like we owed her anything for carrying it. She just carried it. My dad's path looked very different. To his credit, he did eventually understand the full scope of what he'd done. Not just the money, the years, the trust. But it came far too late to matter. He was too deep in debt to recover in any real way. My mom wasn't interested in helping him rebuild. She'd already spent everything she had rebuilding herself. Friends who'd known him for 20 years quietly stopped calling. Even family kept a careful distance. It wasn't cruelty, it was exhaustion, spread out across more people. And there's my own version of this, smaller than either of theirs, but still mine. The university fund that was supposed to be there for me wasn't. The day I turned 18 was more or less the day I understood I was on my own. Get a job, build something, figure it out. It taught me something my dad's own success never quite did, that nothing is guaranteed, and nobody comes to rebuild it for you if you're the one who tore it down. I've never gambled, not once. That's the one lesson out of all of this I can say, without hesitation, that I actually kept. For a long time, I was just angry. Anger doesn't require you to understand anything. It just requires a villain. And for years, my dad was mine. It took me a long time to understand the difference between selfish and sick. He wasn't chasing money at that table. He was chasing a feeling, an escape from something none of us ever got the full picture of. That doesn't undo the damage, but it changed the shape of my anger into something closer to grief. Understanding him isn't the same as excusing him, though. He made the choices. He was also sick while he made them. Holding both of those at once is the closest thing I have to peace. Today, my dad is retired. No company, no staff, no name on a door anymore. Just a pension that covers the basics and not much else. The man who once built something people drove across town to work with now lives quietly, on very little. There was $750,000 he'd put aside once. A house, university, a future he kept promising was already handled. By the time it was over, the debt behind it was more than $1 million. Addiction doesn't just cost you the money in the moment you lose it. It costs you the entire future that money was supposed to build. He had everything. For a long time, I couldn't understand how someone gambles that away. Now I understand. He wasn't gambling with his life. He was gambling to feel something in it. That doesn't excuse what we lost, but it's the only way I've ever made peace with it. I notice it in myself sometimes too. How carefully I hold on to money now. How uneasy I get around risks other people wouldn't think twice about. I used to think that was just caution. Now I think it's inheritance of a kind. Not the inheritance he meant to leave us, but the one his choices left instead. If your family has carried a story like this, I'd like to hear it. Share yours in the comments below, if only so we remember we aren't the only ones carrying it. This was one money confession. Subscribe for the next one.